Hi, hello, and welcome back to the HII Method. My name is Jen Hatz. I am the host of the HII Method podcast and also the founder of the HII Method, a holistic, integrative, and innovative approach to assessing and optimizing human health, well-being, and performance. And I'm partnered with Neuroforce One, a human performance company that has been training champions for years. And they offer training and assessments in their facility as well as remote options available. And after that last episode, we were chatting a bit about the controversial opinions, how there's kind of this contrasting opinion around the topic of sugar and sweeteners. And I like to spark those debates. I like getting in those debates and those discussions, really, because it helps to identify that there are, in fact, these different views of a topic and different perspectives. And some people get really heated on these different views and perspectives. And so it triggered in my mind something that I saw recently on Netflix. It's a documentary called You Are What You Eat. And it's a documentary series, a couple of episodes that are focused entirely around these twin experiments and using changes in diet and lifestyle in these controlled situations of this experiment in these twins. So it's a few twins. It's like 4 sets of twins, really. I said a few twins. It's 4 sets of twins. And they're each sectioned off into either following a vegan diet or an omnivore diet. And then they're put through different training regimens and trying to identify whether or not these changes in their diet and lifestyle impacts then their health and different factors around their health. So they are tested regularly using a few different assessments. So tested on their lean body mass and their bone mass, tested on their stool sample, blood sample, and urine sample. And so they're given all these different assessments throughout this process. It's a 3-month process, and identifying whether or not these twins who are identical twins, so genetically identical, whether or not they experience differences in their health in response to these differences in their lifestyles. And the lifestyles themselves are very similar, with really just the difference being whether it's a vegan diet or an omnivore diet. So I love stuff like this because, first of all, love the fact that they're using twin experiments and that they're focusing on diet and lifestyle, because that is already my jam. If you couldn't identify that already, that is like my thing. I'm all about it. I love it. I love the fact that this is a study focused on twin population, identical twins that are otherwise, genetically identical, and then you're just changing these lifestyle factors and monitoring these different health variables along the way. So I love that. I get real jazzed about that. And some of the key points, these different Netflix documentaries are just in a world of themselves of debate, because there's very often some sort of a push in some way. They need to promote some sort of an angle to the story, right? And so very often, I don't know if Netflix has like some partnership with like a vegan society or something, but very often the Netflix documentaries are very pro-vegan. And that's not in itself a bad thing, but it just gives some really interesting entertainment and material to work with when it comes to trying to debunk myths and approach things. So I love stuff like this because, again, I love debate. But so this contrast of this vegan diet and this omnivore diet. So in the series, they actually pointed out a few really cool things that I was so happy that they did. And they identified through this series and the effects that these changes in diet and lifestyle had on the twins. They showed that the diets were very similar that the changes in health in the twins were very similar regardless of the diets, but that there were some key things that were noted as like, okay, we need to pay attention to this. And it was the fact that paying attention to your lean body mass and preserving and promoting or improving your lean body mass is by far more important, more of a higher priority than your body weight. So that I love the fact that they highlighted that and they emphasized that you need to maintain and preserve and promote and build your lean body mass and not focus at all on the body weight as being a factor of your health, because it's really your body composition that matters. So love the fact that they identified that and promoted that. They also did, I think, a really good job of promoting what it can look like to improve our food distribution and food equity. And what I mean by that is they actually had a little like segment at one point showing an urban garden. It was really like an urban growing area in I want to say it was in Detroit, that they had this urban growing like a club or an organization. And so it's all emphasizing improving access to fresh produce, first of all, that it's also improving your green space within urban environments and adding, in this case, adding these actual growing operations for fresh produce in these urban environments. So you're checking off so many much needed needs, very high priority needs for, especially for urban environments and those who are otherwise food deserts, living in food deserts, where there's this high need, a high priority to redistribute food in a more equitable fashion and to provide fresh food and fresh produce and to improve green space in urban environments and to really change the landscape with, no pun intended there, but change the landscape of how food and where food comes from and in what ways it's distributed, because there's a very clear disconnect in what it means to eat appropriately to be able to nourish and provide the nutrition that we need. And a lot of that disconnect is because of these locations that otherwise don't have the access or the means to have these higher nutrient dense foods readily available to them. So I love the fact that they at least were starting to promote that as a priority, because the flip side of that tends to be this high priority on things that quite honestly don't matter, but that there's this higher level of, if anything, I think like an elitist attitude towards nutrition and health. And that furthers and deepens this separation of what it means to actually be well and to take care of each other and take care of the environment that we live in. And that means to really improve food equity, to really improve food distribution, and to really improve the amount and the variety and access of good food, of produce, to those who need it most. So yeah, I was a big proponent of the fact that they were promoting that throughout this series. Now, some of the things that I think are interesting, I think just, if anything, to spur the conversation itself, is this debate of the vegan diet versus the omnivore diet. And it's because this debate centers on really on like two pillars that they're focused on, of whether one is better or worse than the other. And the two pillars are for your individual health, your actual personal health, and the health of the environment, the health of our overall, the world's population, the environment. So those two pillars there, huge pillars that we're talking about here when it comes to this debate. So when it comes to your personal health, the debate between vegan diet versus omnivore diet, the biggest difference and what I liked about this series is the fact that they focused on a healthy diet categorized for both, if that makes sense. So they focused on having what is a healthy, nutrient-dense diet that contains meat, as well as a healthy, nutrient-dense diet that contains plant-based protein sources. And so because of that, all of the twins really in the study, they all saw improvements because they were following a healthy diet in general. And the differences between whether they were eating meat or eating plant-based protein sources was very minimal. It was much more minimal than any other previous research that is done in these two different types of diets. A lot of times because they're not viewing the reality that you can have a healthy diet that is an omnivore diet. You can have a healthy diet that is a vegan diet. You can also have an unhealthy diet that is omnivore and also have an unhealthy diet that is vegan. So there's a higher degree of importance then on the actual nutrient density of the diet itself, whether or not there is meat in the diet or whether it's plant-based sources of protein on your individual personal health. Now, here's the fun part. So when it comes to the other pillar then about what is better for the environment, so this is where a lot of the debate comes from, because being heavily emphasizing meats and meat-based protein products has been largely implicated in furthering or progressing or increasing the more rapid changes in our environment and really rapid changes in just climate change. Like the actual greenhouse emissions from livestock, especially from the different conditions and environments that that livestock is being kept in and fed, and that this entire cycle is happening within these conditions. It's massively increasing the greenhouse emissions. It's massively increasing specifically methane production that is being released into the atmosphere. And so this is a very real reality that we are looking at when it comes to our food industry in total, of what it is that we are rapidly or very highly prioritizing when it comes to what we grow and farm and cultivate, and what the effects are then on the environment. The flip side of that, though, would be taking all of the land that we have and instead growing all these different plant-based sources of protein, and really just plants in general, in order to feed people, instead of growing these crops to feed livestock to feed people. So there's this very large debate about what is actually the best route to go when it comes to promoting what people eat, knowing that we have, in a way, limited space. If you want to think of it like this, we have limited space to actually grow crops, and to do so effectively, and to do so in a manner that we are maintaining as best as possible the environmental conditions. We're not impairing or interfering with the environmental conditions, at least not doing anything to exacerbate, to rapidly increase climate instability and climate change. Like the best we can do to maintain as stable of these climate conditions as possible, what's the best route to go? And the reality is, and this is what I think might break some hearts to hear, is that this debate of one or the other is not really, that's not really the answer. The answer is a combination of both. So what I mean by that is, what we have experienced, what we have seen as a trend up until now, is that the high priority on having a lot of meat or a lot of animal-based protein products has been very far out of proportion with what is actually needed for the body, for your human body on a day-to-day basis. We'll say this, the visual that you have on your plate of how much you actually need is far skewed out of proportion from what you do actually need. And instead, if you replaced some of that on your plate with plant-based foods, you personally, your individual health improves massively. And also, we have that much more of a balanced, what's the word I'm looking for? A more balanced distribution of crops and of livestock across the spaces that we do have to be able to grow and promote these different food sources, because now the actual consumers are eating a more balanced intake of those different food sources. So the emphasis on wanting to like push an entire dietary approach on people, as if like pushing an entire vegan lifestyle onto people as a way to promote environmental health, or to immediately like debate that and combat that and say no, that people need to be eating meat. There is in fact a middle ground that I think is not really being identified as much as it needs to. It's the fact that most people who are eating a diet that is an omnivore diet, chances are they're overeating the amount of meat that they do actually need, and instead they're eating more than they need. So if just that little change of just slightly reducing or really prioritizing the appropriate portions of animal products within your days, and having then the appropriate amount of plant-based proteins and plant-based foods in general throughout your days, that, like I said, your individual health improves, as well as providing that much more of a balance for our environment. So I know that's like not at all the highly the heated like high debate answer of like, no, there's only one way and it's this way. Instead, there is no one way. It's the middle road between everything. And it's the fact that like we need to really identify what it means to have balance in our diets, to have balance on our plates, to look at what moderation actually looks like. What is an appropriate portion size? And if you don't know what an appropriate portion size looks like for a certain food, there are apps available. And there are all these different tools available for us to really zero in and identify these things. And I get very, I think, excited about the fact that we are talking about these discussions, that we're having these discussions, that we're needing to identify these things that we were never taught before, because this was previously, for generations, this was the primary focus that human beings constantly focused on, was food. That was their primary focus. That was the primary form of work for people for generations and generations. It was knowing about food, how to grow it, how to either farm animals or how to grow and cultivate different crops. If it was hunting and gathering, it's like food was always something that we understood, and we always focused on it and worked hard to maintain a balance of it and to find what we need. And because the last couple of decades of specifically last couple of decades of human life has been so far distracted from that, we instead now need to go back to that basic source of knowledge and kind of reacquaint ourselves with what it means to just be a human, to eat what we in fact need to eat, and to find the sources of what we need in the most appropriate, balanced way. And so we do, in fact, at least have tools now to our advantage to help bridge that gap of education that we may have not been raised in the way that previous generations were raised. So we may have not been raised in a way to have this knowledge at our like in the front of our mind at all times, but we do at least have these tools now to be able to acquire that knowledge and to be able to gain those skills on a regular basis. So if there's one takeaway today, think about what your plate actually looks like or what your meals look like, and start to really use those tools to your advantage that are available on your phone, that you can just download this app, and start to really piece together, okay, how much am I actually eating of these different foods? How much should I have? How much is actually recommended for these different foods? What do I need to do in order to make these slight changes so that way I'm taking in exactly what I need to be taking in, no more, no less. And that's going to have that much more of an impact on the environment and on the food industry itself, on where and how much we are taking from versus giving to another. So yeah, we're solving all these problems one person at a time, really. But if you do want more information about that, the Performance and Wellness course that I have linked in the show notes goes into detail about how to look at what you're portioning out, what is appropriate for you in terms of your portions, and how to identify those different tools and different ways to assess and measure what's on your plate, ways to assess and measure what it is that you're taking in, whether or not you are making your own meals or you're ordering something from a restaurant or you're out traveling and you need to make quick decisions on the go. This is all included in the Performance and Wellness course, linked in the show notes. And one last piece of little tidbit of advice here for you. If anything, and this is probably because it's like basically around Valentine's Day right now when I'm recording this. So everybody that's going out to restaurants, right? So take a look at the plate that you receive at a restaurant and take a look at the portion sizing and start to ask yourself, is this really the appropriate portion sizing, or is this just what a restaurant is giving me? Is this what they decided is the right portion sizing according to them and what they want to create as a meal? Is this actually what I personally need, or is it just what I'm being given? And if anything, and this kind of goes along with the couples theme of like Valentine's Day. So there was at one point in time a difference in like a his and her like plates, if you want to think of it like that, about how much meat was on like his plate versus how much meat was on her plate, and how much of the plate had vegetables on it for his plate versus her plate. So we need to remove that line of thinking, start thinking of everyone's plates as if it is unique to you and what you need. There's no more his and hers plates. No more he gets more meat because he's a man. No. He needs the right amount of meat because he's a man. Just like she needs the right amount of meat because she's a woman. And same thing for vegetables. He needs the right amount of vegetables for him. And so start thinking about what is best for you. What is it that you actually require from the standpoint of those different nutrients and what foods are providing those nutrients, and then how to appropriately portion it out. And you're going to get to know what your plate looks like, and you're going to be so proud of it and so proud of the fact that you are promoting not only your own health, but also better health for the environment. All right. Take care, everyone. Bye.